We are one day away from the NHL draft and the rumor mill is really starting to heat up. Today we have the latest on JT Miller in Vancouver. Where might he be traded to? We have a couple of rumors out of St. Louis as well. The Montreal Canadiens might be interested in an Oilers defenseman, and it may not be the only move we see out of Edmonton. Plus we also have some signings, a promotion in New Jersey I want to talk about, and some sad news as well from Montreal in the NHL draft. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors and UFA rumors to take a look at here today, one day out before the 2022 NHL draft. First up, I want to take a minute here and acknowledge some sad news that was announced just a couple of hours ago here. Sad news in the NHL. Longtime NHL player and current member of the Sharks scouting staff, Bryan Marchment, has suddenly passed away in Montreal. Of course, he had arrived in Montreal for the draft, being as part of the Sharks scouting team, and I'm not sure exactly what happened. Cause of death or anything like that was not released, but whatever it was, we know it was something sudden that happened, and at age 53, Marchment is no longer with us. It's incredibly sad news. Of course, Marchment was a huge part of the Sharks organization. He's worked for them since 2007. Of course, had a long NHL career spanning as a player over 17 years, playing with a variety of teams, multiple stops across Canada, including the Winnipeg Jets, Edmonton Oilers, Calgary Flames, and Toronto Maple Leafs. And of course, also made appearances for the Hartford Whalers, the Chicago Blackhawks, Tampa, Colorado, and of course the San Jose Sharks themselves as well, where he's worked for so long. So terribly sad news. And of course, he is the father of Florida Panthers player Mason Marchment as well. So, of course, Mason Marchment had a breakout year last year with the Panthers and is currently a UFA. So I'm sure that's having a major impact on, Mason and, of course, Brian's wife and the rest of his family. So we want to extend our condolences to the Marchment families. Incredibly sad news, gone way too soon at such a young age. Bryan Marchment passes away at age 53. Now on to some other news. We get some more good news in New Jersey, where they've made another promotion. We now have another female assistant general manager in the NHL, which is great to see. Kate Madigan has been promoted to the role of assistant GM with New Jersey. She's been with the Devils in a variety of capacities since 2017 and certainly worked her way up and earned her promotion. So great to see. We've seen a variety of females getting opportunities in the NHL lately, which, well-deserved qualified females, which is certainly an awesome thing to see, and I hope it continues across the league. The Montreal Canadiens also made an announcement today. They've added 4 former players, so 4 members of their alumni, as what they call team ambassadors. I believe they're all going to be around for the NHL draft. We'll be making a variety of appearances, but that's a couple of them are former captains as well, and including Guy Carbonneau. Of course, Carbonneau played for the Habs a long time, was also a coach at one point. Vincent Danfus, Patrice Brisebois, and Knuckles himself, Chris Nyland. They're all team ambassadors for the Habs moving forward, which is great to see the alumni heavily involved with the organization. We also have some signings today. The Boston Bruins announced a pair of signings. Goaltender Kyle Kaiser along with Nick Wolf both get 1-year, 2-way contracts. Both will likely play at their American Hockey League team in Providence. We've also seen a signing in Columbus where they've announced the signing of young defenseman Adam Boqvist, who seems like he's been in the NHL so long now, but he's still only 21 years of age. Of course, he was taken in the first round of the 2018 draft by Chicago and was involved in the Seth Jones trade to Columbus, so he's got 1 year in Columbus under his belt. He gets a 3-year contract extension valued at an average annual value here of $2.6 million. So I think that's a pretty fair deal. He put up 22 points last year. He's still growing, still evolving. I know when Boqvist was in his draft year, he looked like one of those players who had tons of upside, lots of potential, especially offensively, but many expected it was going to take a good 4 or 5 years to see him kind of gain his footing and be, have a chance to be closer to his ceiling. So things will continue to evolve for him as he gets a bigger role with the Blue Jackets organization. Now, the story out of Russia as well, we saw goaltender Ivan Fedotov, certainly be detained, with a lot of question marks around what's going on there. There's lots more stories out today. It's hard to kind of sift through and really know what's right, what's not, what's legit. NHL teams and a variety of reporters seem to be kind of doing their due diligence here and digging around to see what's the case here. There was some reports earlier, which I'm not sure. I think they've been debunked. I'm pretty sure from Sports Express, I believe, that Kirill Kaprizov was wanted in Russia on account of purchasing a fraudulent military ID, which the goaltender for the Flyers, Fedotov, that's been detained. I guess he was linked to having done the same thing or something like that. And there was also reports of other Russian players that could be, I guess wanted or, potentially arrested here. There was some reports that Kaprizov was had a reprieve until June 30th or something to that effect. I'm not completely sure what's legit and what's not. All I know is this is a story we need to continue to follow. It seems to be a case, obviously, of Russia wanting to keep their players in the KHL. We know that some of the KHL teams in the league itself is highly connected through their political system and Vladimir Putin. Certainly, I don't know all the ins and outs of everything like that, but I think some of these teams are still very cautious around their players being over there and hoping that they don't have any issues coming back. I know there's a bunch of Russian players in the NHL that have been over there. We've seen pictures posted on social media, which is fine. It's their home. They have every right to go. But will they have any issues getting back if they're deemed to have done anything, whether it's evading military service or anything like that, like the case of the Flyers goaltender? You hope that they don't run into any problems. But there were some reports that Kaprizov, as soon as he found out about some of these reports, had come back to North America. But I believe those were, I'm pretty sure I've seen other reports kind of conflicting that it was debunked and that Kaprizov was actually over there for, I think he had a quick medical procedure, nothing serious, just some kind of a, fairly routine surgery. And I guess he is studying over there at a university, and he was there for a short stretch and was on his way back to North America. But I believe the Wild have indicated he's not in the U.S., so he could be somewhere in between. I'm not sure where he is. It's an odd, bizarre story, and you just have to feel a little bit concerned for some of these Russian players. And if they're going to run into any problems, of course, we can't say they will or they won't, because it's just a really hard, confusing story to follow, but it's something we need to definitely keep an eye on for sure, and I hope we don't see any other additional Russian NHL players run into issues like we've seen with the Flyers prospect goaltender that was hoping to make the jump to North America this year. Now, on to the rumor mill. As far as some of the top free agents that are negotiating with their teams, for the most part, if they're not signed by now, the odds of going to free agency are really good. They're only just over a week away from the UFA period beginning. Players like Chris Letang sound like he's likely going to be staying in Pittsburgh. Reports are Ron Hextall said that to media today, that he'd be very surprised and shocked if he doesn't get a deal done with Letang. In fact, he hopes to have it done before they leave Montreal. So that's encouraging if you're a Penguins fan and you're hoping that Letang will stick around. There's latest on Philip Forsberg still indicates that at this point he's not really completely aligned with the Predators when it comes to their negotiations, but I don't think by the sound of things they're that far apart. So I think there's a pathway there to get a deal done from what we're hearing, but at the same time, you just never know. Really haven't heard much of anything on Johnny Gaudreau. Still status quo there. It sounds like to me he's 100% going to market, and we'll have to wait and see what happens on that front. But there's lots of other names out there as well. We did get confirmation through a variety of NHL insiders that John Klingberg of the Dallas Stars is definitely going to market as well. They had some additional conversations with the Stars, but they're still far apart and unlikely to reach a deal to keep him there. I mean, they just have too much money tied up on their blue line to sign him to a big money long-term extension. So to me, I think he departs and ends up somewhere else. Now, onto the trade section, Noel. Lots of talk around the rumor mill. Obviously, things appear to be heating up on JT Miller out of Vancouver. Heard Jeff Merrick on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio this morning, and of course more comments from Frank Seravalli earlier today in the DFL Rundown, talking about the fact that things appear to be heating up on Miller when it comes to trade chatter. The Canucks and his agents apparently have had additional conversations since heading toward the draft, and they're really no closer to reaching an agreement. So basically, I think the Canucks would prefer a much shorter term than him and less money. They like the player, but they don't want to be doing an 8-year contract at $9 million or more, or anything of that nature, for what he would command based on his age. So a trade is extremely likely. More likely goes down before tomorrow night's first round draft is over, before the Canucks make their pick, or the team that's acquiring makes their selection, I should say, because I would think a first round pick will definitely be part of the equation here. The latest word from American Sarah Valley is that the Rangers appear to be the leading contender, and that things are trending towards New York, is what the words were of Jeff Merrick. Of course, no guarantee it gets done. He said he has to think that Capo Caco would be included in the package going to Vancouver, and probably be the main piece that would be built around. I would think a first-round pick would be included as well. But the problem is the Rangers don't have a 2022 first. So would they be willing to part with the 2023 first? I mean, if they're confident they're going to do just as well as last year, that pick is going to be the bottom 4 or 5 picks in round 1. They may not be too worried about that, but if things don't go well, then obviously that wouldn't be good. So I would imagine they would build in a condition to protect that pick as a top 10 or something to that effect, top 15. I don't know how far they'd go, but there'd be some sort of protection around it if they did that. Of course, I would think maybe a player like Philip Hedl would be involved. It would give Vancouver another young center to replace Miller. So that's a possibility. Of course, Hedl and Kako played together a lot as well, so that gives them 2/3 of the kid line. Could be part of this package. You still got players like Vitaly Kravtsov that could be in there. They have a lot of young defensemen that the Canucks would probably like as well. Whether it be Nils Lundqvist, to me, would probably be the most likely one that the Rangers would want or be willing to part with. They seem to be pretty high on Braden Schneider, so I don't see him being a player they want to part with. Libor Hayek's another one. Of course, you get Georgiev as well, although I don't think the Canucks really need a goaltender, so I don't think Georgiev would be something they'd be interested in, but you never know, I guess. But all those types of players would be something around that, would be the types of pieces included here going to the Canucks if they pull off a deal for Miller. But that appears to be the trend that is going down right now. Other teams, though, like Washington, with the uncertainty of Nicholas Backstrom's future, they're in the mix as well. New Jersey is in the mix in a variety of things. Obviously, New Jersey has that number 2 overall pick too, so we know that they might part with it, of course. And I don't know if they'd want to part with number 2 overall for Miller, though. That would be a big return for Vancouver to go all the way to number 2. That would be very, very interesting, and I'm sure the Canucks would be interested in that. I just don't know if that's something that the Devils want to do, but they are willing to part with that pick for the right player. The question is Miller the guy? So time will tell. When it comes to the Oilers, there's the latest talk here from Elliot Friedman and others talking about Jesse Puljujarvi likely being shopped around by the Oilers. Looks like at this point in time, that his future in Edmonton appears to be coming to an end. I've seen other reporters like Dave Pagnotta and even other local Edmonton media talking about the fact that it sounds like the player likely is going to get moved, but the return right now is not overly great. Teams are only offering a mid-round pick. So will the Oilers make that move? They need the cap space. They're also waiting on clarification from Mike Smith and Duncan Keith if they're going to play this year. There was some speculation they could retire, or in a case of Mike Smith, that he might be too banged up to even play and could end up on long-term injury reserve, which is what many insiders feel is likely going to happen. In the case of Keith, though, there's some that say that he's seriously considering retirement. So if that's the case, they need to know, because that has a big impact on their salary cap space. So obviously that's another big part that could maybe change their minds on what they do with Puljujarvi, right? But they certainly need some help on the wings. If Puljujarvi's not going to be one of those players, somebody else needs to be. So they kind of have to make some decisions here. But I know there was a variety of teams reportedly interested in Puljujarvi, but they're not offering a whole lot. So we'll have to see how Ken Holland responds to that. And we know that the Montreal Canadiens are considering a Jeff Petry trade at his request. We know Petry still technically wants to be moved. I think basically what he's told the Canadiens is that if they can't find a trade and it doesn't work out, that he's not going to be super unhappy over it. Like, he'll come back, but I think they would still prefer a trade, especially to a U.S. team, closer to be family. Obviously, as they're American, as him and his wife have a young family with numerous children. They'd like to be closer to home, especially when he's on the road. Obviously, a lot of hockey families like to be closer to families that have extra help around and things like that. So from a family perspective, makes a lot of sense. That's why we thought maybe Detroit would be a good pick for Petry, for the Michigan native. Of course, even Dallas was also another option that appeared to be a possibility given the fact they might lose John Klingberg. But Petry, they could probably get him for less term and money than Klingberg would be signing for, so it might be a good replacement option. So if Montreal is able to facilitate a Petry trade, which is something they're working on, could they turn back to the Oilers and look to a guy like Tyson Barrie as a potential replacement? So we've talked about Petry as a replacement maybe for Klingberg in Dallas, for example. Well, could Barrie be that guy to replace Petry in Montreal? We know the Oilers are a team that needs to shed space. Obviously, like I said, other players, though, like Duncan Keith and Mike Smith, will have an impact on all this, which we don't know the answers to yet. But assuming that they don't get a big relief in cap space through that method, we know they're also trying to sign Evander Kane. And there's lots that they're trying to do here to get this team, make sure they're still as good as they were last year and going into the future to be able to contend to be, back to the conference finals and Final Four here yet again and compete for a Stanley Cup. So, moving Barrie could free up a lot of space. Evan Bouchard can do the same kind of role. Montreal could use a veteran right shot defenseman to replace Petry on a shorter term and less money. So there could be a fit there. So Friedman wonders if there might be a deal that we see in that regard. So something else to keep an eye on. A couple Canadian teams maybe hooking up. And in St. Louis, there appears to be the big news out of Frank Seravalli's DFO rundown today was that Vladimir Tarasenko has not rescinded his trade request. And in fact, it really sounds like he wants to be moved, according to Seravalli's comments. He says basically after 2 botched shoulder surgeries and being exposed in the expansion draft, Tarasenko basically responded by having a career season in terms of points. Wasn't quite there in terms of goals, but certainly his best season in a long time. Like I said, definitely his best season when it comes to point totals. Led the team in scoring. But certainly at this point, even though we heard Doug Armstrong make comments before that he wasn't concerned over the relationship with Tarasenko, what Seravalli is saying is that he definitely wants to be moved. And he's got 1 year left at $7.5 million. And obviously one thing he wondered about could be the missing piece in Carolina. We know Carolina's got players like Niederreiter, D'Angelo, and Trocheck, all UFA, that may or may not return. We know that they need a sniping kind of forward, like a goal scorer to play in that top 6, ideally in the top line. Tarasenko could be that guy. He's, a 30-plus goal guy yet again. The shoulder appears to be in good shape now. Good chance to take a flyer on him for 1 season at $7.5 million, which to me would fit well with what else they have going on. They could, let some of these other players walk to bring him in. That to me could make sense. Another team that comes to mind as well would be the Islanders, just because we know they're looking for a scoring winger to play with Barzal, but that kind of contract would be tough for them to squeeze in. Lou would have to pull off some Lou Lamoriello magic like he did last offseason to find some salary cap space. If he can move Josh Bailey, if he can move another player on top of that, then maybe it can happen, but it's going to be tough, especially with the way their cap situation is. But Tarasenko apparently does want to be moved, and it's something we could see. And the Blues are also, I wouldn't say they're shopping him, but they're exploring to possibly moving Torrey Krug. Torrey Krug, of course, signed a 7-year deal after leaving the Boston Bruins. Has been there for a few years at $6.5 million. And apparently the Blues are looking to maybe shake up their blue line, and they are exploring a Torrey Krug trade. Now, of course, Krug is now 31 years old, still putting up decent offensive numbers, battled some injuries last year. We know he's not an overly huge guy, but he's managed to have a pretty solid offensive career numbers that way. I don't wonder. It's a lot of money in term left, though, so I'm not going to be an easy player to move. And he does have control, so the team would have to talk to Krug over his no-move clause to go to another team. But as we've seen with a case like Ryan McDonagh, it's not impossible, especially if players have a destination that they're happy to go to. It can certainly take place. But at this point, it sounds like the team is exploring some trade conversations, gauging the market, see what other teams might be interested. And if they reach the point that they have something that they would like to do, then of course they'll approach the player for consent to make it happen. But we'll have to see where that goes. But another player that hasn't really appeared on any trade bait boards popping up here today. So a few players in St. Louis to keep our eye on, along with JT Miller, the guys in Edmonton, and lots of the other players we've talked about here in recent days. All kinds of activity that has potential that we could see here between today, tomorrow, the next few days. Day 1 and 2 of the draft, Thursday and Friday, should be busy. I'm bound to see at least a handful of trades. We'll have to see, but that's the latest and everything. Let me know your thoughts on everything down in the comments. We can discuss further. Certainly stay tuned to Top Shelf Hockey. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis. And if you're new, make sure you subscribe and stick around. I'll be posting content like crazy here, keeping everybody up to date on what's going on in this silly season around the NHL. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.